He's an absolute magician. He's set up for...
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Troy Nunes and Absolute Livestream. Frozen is Andy Pregler. The rest of us are Steve Haller and Christian DeGuzman. How are we doing this week, guys?
Okay, but as Andy and I realized over the past couple of weeks, packing is an awful thing to do.
It is easily the least enjoyable process that I have done as a young adult, as an adult, and as a child. It has just continued to be terrible the entire way through. So, yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah. That's one of those things where I'm very glad I have a house and don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah.
Cheers.
I'm incredibly jealous. Instead, I am living in my new Brooklyn studio. Well, it's not a studio apartment, but I have like a office recording studio that will continue to add Syracuse stuff on the wall behind me. That is a daily orange of the last Syracuse-Georgetown game on campus. So clearly we are already into off-season content when we are talking about the decor. Christian, Steve, it's Memorial Day weekend. It is the official start of the summer. It is the start of the collegiate content off-season calendar. And that's because it is lacrosse championship weekend, as we covered, well, actually, as Steve and Kevin covered on the show a few weeks ago. Men's lacrosse did not make it to the Memorial Day Final Four. The women, however, did. They played the championship game yesterday against Boston College. They ended up losing. The score is less important. What you need to know is that the Orange and Boston College played a really tight first half. The Orange were down 9-8 at halftime. Honestly, I was feeling like not great, but I wasn't feeling terrible. And then Boston College came out, and the first 10 minutes of the second half were the closest that I have seen to a Syracuse lacrosse beatdown in a very long time. And it wasn't as if the Orange played badly. BC played perhaps the most perfect 10 minutes of lacrosse that you could possibly imagine. They won almost every draw control, and the ones that they did not win, they easily started a transition opportunity by stopping the Syracuse attack in its tracks. And I believe they ended up going 6 of 6 on shot attempts before Syracuse was able to stop any of the Boston College attack. So ultimately, the Orange lose. Boston College gets their first women's lacrosse national championship. I know both of you, I ended up watching for most of the game. I tuned out after Syracuse went down 6 in the second half, as I believe most of the Syracuse fans did. Honestly, Christian, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the season as a whole, and what were taking away from all of this? Like, what do you take away from this season for the women's lacrosse program?
Well, let's consider, I think I echo a lot of sentiments that have been made across Twitter, not just before this weekend, not just during this weekend, but before this weekend as well. And that's that Garrett Gay probably should have won Coach of the Year this year, because he made it a championship weekend and played a very competitive game against Boston College until it got away in the second half, but still played a very competitive game against Boston College in the championship game without two of his top offensive weapons in Emery Harris-Chuck and Megan Carney. And Harris-Chuck was not there for most of the season. Carney, they're not there for the latter half of the season. So the fact that he was able to not only tame the losses of those two key players, but then also find a success in the other players on his team and push them towards the championship game deserves more recognition than it does. Because right now, there's not a lot of spotlight on him and the coaching job that he's done with this team specifically, given the situation they were in, losing key players to their team.
Yeah, Steve, another loss that Syracuse suffered in this game. Emma Tyrell ended up getting booted from this game. She got 2 yellow cards in the first half. Not a blow that Syracuse could really afford. They were able to find a way to work around it, but we were jokingly talking about soccer in the pre-show, but anytime that you're in a championship match and one of your key players is booted with 2 yellow cards in the first half, you are already playing behind the 8 ball, and it felt like the women finally made one too many mistakes that their pure talent couldn't overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like you said, in soccer, just speaking from where I know it from, you have a situation where you get what could be considered a light yellow, and then you're kind of playing from the back foot the entire time, and uh, the refs, consciousness is on you. Uh, you kind of got to be careful. I did not see um, either of the fouls, but from some of the comments, it seemed like at least one of them could have been a little harsher, or a little harsh for a yellow. So I don't know. It's a weird situation. After over the course of the year losing two of your top attackers and then losing more talent as the championship progresses is not the best way to hold on to a title. So it's
Yeah.
awesome to see Gate do what he's done, and this team, fight through everything that they've done. Like I said, losing three of their top players to various injuries, or two of their top players to various injuries. It's just a testament to the team and the program. But unfortunately, they couldn't get it done right at the end.
Yeah, there was a lot of criticism of the referees happening, especially in the second half as Boston College was going on its run. A lot of calls were preventing Syracuse from potentially stemming any of the tide that Boston College was throwing at them.
Yeah.
Part of that, I think, is that the refs were definitely calling a little bit tighter of a game than you might have hoped in a title game. But the other part of it is that women's lacrosse has rules that do make it kind of difficult to play from behind and physically impose your will on a team, which ultimately, I said this at the top, but like Boston College was playing such a technically sound game, there really wasn't much that Syracuse could do schematically to disrupt that flow. And so they attempted to try to physically disrupt the flow, and the referees were not going to allow any of that to happen. So on the one hand, yes, I think that the criticisms of the referees are justified. On the other hand, Syracuse was only put in that position because they ended up so far behind they didn't really have much of a choice but to touch the referees. And I think both Steve, you and Christian touched on something that's kind of important here that I want to get to. So Walker Weinstein, the head coach of Boston College, ESPN, Jay Alter, and was talking about it consistently. She's 0-3 in title games leading up to this one. She had gone to the last 3 title games as a head coach, lost all 3 of them. This was really like the moment where this was her moment to get over the hill. It kind of felt like, sorry to do this, Steve, but you don't want to Buffalo Bills the situation. You don't want to go over 4 because that feels like the kiss of death from okay, this is probably the last chance that I'm going to get to get to this opportunity.
You're also not sorry.
I'm a little bit sorry for it because I'm going to bring up the fact that Gary Gate is now 0-3 in the national title game. And he was hired, this was his 12th season as a head coach of Syracuse Women's Lacrosse. And the fact that he took Syracuse Women's Lacrosse from a non-national title contender to one of the premier powers in the sport, it speaks a lot to his character as a head coach. But he hasn't gotten over the hump. And it feels like the team is going to continue to be good, but this might have been the last really good chance he had at a title without having to spin some gold with these next upcoming classes that he's got coming in. And both of you, Steve, we'll kind of start with you since you know Syracuse lacrosse, you know the history of Syracuse lacrosse from just being in the area this long. Ultimately, Gary Gates' legacy as a Syracuse lacrosse icon is cemented. Yeah. This women's lacrosse title is really the cherry on top, but it is starting to get into that territory of like, man, maybe he just can't do it. And that feels a little bit unfair to the legacy of somebody who has had such a tremendous impact on the game of lacrosse in Central New York.
Yeah, it's for one, like we've seen from James Arthur Boeheim, winning a title doesn't just happen. He's got one in, how many decades at this point. It's people. I think people put too much on a title. And I'm saying this as Chelsea just won the Champions League. I had to slap that in there somewhere. But
I'm sorry. I hate you. We will get to that at halftime.
Basically, people. I think people hang a lot or almost too much on actually winning a title. And in a game like women's lacrosse, where yes, there are a couple of powers that are consistently going to be there, but it's much like the men's game is coming around more to a more balanced field. Yes, your first round games are still going to be relatively easy if you're a top team, but it's kind of rounding into a sport where at this point, getting to that many title games is a testament to what he's done with the program. And next year, if this squad can hold itself together, you're losing Goldstock, you're losing some of the defense. If they can, you're bringing back literally your two All-American top scorer or top offensive players, and if they can just run roughshod over people, maybe that'll help. But it's going to be interesting to see what this offseason brings. To get back to your point, I don't know if the Gates title would be the cherry on top, but I don't think it's anything keeping you from ordering the sundae.
I do want to point out that from what I can tell, this is the first time in Gates' championships as women's lacrosse head coach that Syracuse was favored. So that's the like real kick for Syracuse, is that in the first two ones, Northwestern in 2012 and then Maryland, I think it was either 2014 or 2015. They weren't favored. The Northwestern team was a 2 seed, Syracuse was a 4 seed, and that Maryland team was akin to the North Carolina dynasty, probably even better than the North Carolina dynasty right now. So Syracuse were going into those first two games as underdogs. This was the first game that Syracuse was coming in as a favorite. But as everyone says, it's hard to beat a team 3 times, especially when you're like talking about it in a football sense. And this is a Syracuse and Boston College teams that had played each other 3 times before. So this is the 4th time that they were playing them. And so, yes, that there was probably a little bit of a tough job there, but that's the only kicker there, is that this was the first time that Syracuse was favored in a championship game when Gary Gay was the coach, and unfortunately just couldn't quite get it done. And maybe if they were facing North Carolina, maybe they had the adjustments made, but of course it's North Carolina as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe Boston College just had a better, game plan against them, but it is tough to see him lose in this fashion, and for the program to lose in this fashion, because I think most of us were coming in feeling pretty good that it was Boston College and not North Carolina in the title game, because when you went into those last 2 championship games, I felt like maybe Syracuse wins, but they'll probably lose. This is the one where you thought like, okay, this is the best chance that he's had in a while, and the kicker is, again, with the dynasty programs and the legacy programs that North Carolina and Maryland have built, you don't know when that chance is going to come up again.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Christian, that this really was the opening, and all credit to Boston College. It's very clear that they had a Final Four weekend where they were every sports cliche that you can roll out there in terms of just being the underdog that knew how to play and came in ready. I don't think it was a situation where Syracuse wasn't ready. I think it was more of a case of Boston College just they were up for it. Nobody was going to beat them. Whoever stepped on the field against them was going to have a difficult time. And I tweeted this out, and I think there was not a big conversation. There were some people talking about how the losses that Syracuse faced early on in the season with losing those top 2 attackers wasn't really an impact, and they were going to be fine no matter what. In a game like this, I can't say that having those players gets them the win, but early on, Syracuse had a lot of really good opportunities that they couldn't finish against Boston College. Boston College's defense was making some great saves, some great stops. I don't know if you have different finishers, if that changes things and Syracuse goes into the half up, and so when Boston College goes on a run, instead of Boston College pulling away, it's Boston College coming back and only being ahead by, a goal or 2. These are the things that you can play hypotheticals with till the end of time and not really have a good answer on. But it definitely goes to Christian, you said it. Gary Gait deserves a lot more recognition for the coaching job he did on getting here, and ultimately, this really was the best chance that they had to be a non-Maryland, non-UNC, non-Northwestern team for the national title, and they ran up against a team that knew their playbook better than Syracuse knew their playbook, and it stinks. It sucks, and I want to give all credit to the women's lacrosse team, who was clearly the best Syracuse team of this pandemic craziness season. They gave us something to cheer about. They gave us a Final Four run. Seems like every year we're talking about a Syracuse Final Four run in some sport, and this year was getting really down to the wire that we were going to even see one, especially with the way the men's lacrosse season went, and women's lacrosse, pulled it out, gave Syracuse fans something to cheer for until the end of the season. And I believe that there are NCAA track and field championships. I think that there are some rowing championships. But all said and done, there are no more Syracuse teams competing for national titles anymore. So we have officially reached the weird off-season content of the NunesMagician calendar, guys. I didn't think we'd get here, all things being serious. Like, this was a weird year for everybody. And now we get to do our weird time in a semi-less weird year. So thanks for everybody who stuck. What was that?
We're going to make things more weird?
Oh, yeah, 100%. We're going to start with talking about football at the 20-minute mark of the Livescast. There wasn't a ton of news that happened this week, all things considered, but we did get some Syracuse football times. Four of these, I think it was 4 or 5 of the Syracuse games were given official start times. I'm pulling up the article right now. It was 5 games. We are looking at a September 4th game against Ohio, 7 p.m. on CBS Sports. The September 11th game against Rutgers will be at 2 o'clock on the ACC network. The Albany game at the Carrier Dome will be in Nooner. No surprise there. The Liberty game on the 24th is going to be an 8 p.m. primetime game on the ACC network. And then, naturally, the Friday night game against Clemson later in the season, 7 p.m. on ESPN.
Can they just play that Clemson game at noon so that we don't have to, roll with that?
Well, unfortunately, October 15th is a Friday, so...
Yeah, no, I'm saying just put it on middle of the workday. Just don't worry about it. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Steve, I think you know what I'm going to say, which is the last time that we played Clemson on a Friday in October, Eric Dungy and Steve Ishmael went off, and Dabo Sweeney decided to try a few fake special teams plays that ultimately went nowhere.
No, the last time we played Clemson on a Friday night in October, I was at my friend's wedding, who we explicitly scheduled on a Friday night so as to not miss a game, and gave my tickets away to one of my good buddies. So I missed it.
Wow.
We were literally all sitting around phones at the reception, just like, oh my God, they're gonna do it. So. Yep.
How many, okay, Christian, over under 25, the number of times on the ACC network that Packer and Durham mention that the last time that Syracuse played Clemson on a Friday night in Syracuse, the Syracuse Orange defeated the Clemson Tigers.
If that was an actual bet, the over would be taken so many times that the line would have to be shifted upwards.
It really does feel like out of all the games, like that's the lazy narrative out of all of this. Like I Christian, I don't think any of us are super surprised about a whole lot of those start times. I'm a little bit shocked that the Rutgers game is a 2 p.m.er instead of a nooner. Like that really feels like some prime, I don't know, mediocre Northeast football. But overall, I think the schedule is kind of shaping out to be what we expected it to be.
The Ohio game at 7 p.m. is a little odd as well, and that's a little awkward as well because that is a Saturday. So I'm not I'm not expecting like the last thing I'm expecting is prime time ACC versus MAC early season matchup.
Come on! What, you don't want early September MACtion? Like, come on! That's prime time written all over.
Tuesdays. Okay, you have to take your MACtion at the correct date.
True.
True. Or else the MACtion loses its luster. If you know what I'm saying. So that's an important distinction to make with your MACtion. Otherwise, like if Syracuse, Ohio is really getting people turning into CBS Sports on a Saturday evening. I mean,
that's
that's one, and the other one is Liberty at 8 p.m. Like, what are we doing at 8 p.m. for like if it's 7 p.m. like that's normal, but like 8 p.m. is like a little bit too late for a football game on the East Coast to start. If you guys know what I'm talking about, like unless it's the ESPN Game Day like game, like then like you can understand, but like 8 p.m. just seems like a little bit too late for an East Coast game to start.
Yeah, you can cover that one, dude.
That 8 p.m. game. That 8 p.m.
Yeah.
game screams 3.5, 4 hours of ACC Network just punting on all their late night
It's going
programming.
to be 4 hours.
Oh yeah.
Like that's the thing. It's going to be 4 hours. That's going to be that one game that inexplicably takes way longer than it should be, and you're like, how did we get here?
It's going to be halftime, like 2.5 hours in, and they're going to be doing that thing in the third and fourth quarters, where like every single punt, they're just like, "All right, start the game clock as soon as that ball lands." Like, we are not cutting to commercial. We are doing at least 20 actual live minutes without a commercial.
Because it's on the ACC network, they will cut to commercial because they need the tax sponsorship money. So, like, unfortunately, that's also going to contribute to the 4-hour time run.
The old tech money.
Christian,
wait, hold on. Time out on that. I told you guys when I bought my camper, there was a tack light that was in there, right?
No.
There was legitimately. So we got a pop-up this year to go camping, which is also, the actual reason why I'm going to have you cover that game, Christian. Like, normally I would be there, but I'm going to be in, I think, somewhere in the southern tier. Don't ask me. My wife made the schedule. I was like, okay, you filled September up. Great. John's going to shoot me. Here we go.
John's not having a baby this year. It's fine.
Oh, there we go. So I opened up one of the compartments, and there's literally a tack lantern sitting in there, like Bell and Howell right across it. I'm like, I can't make this up.
I'm surprised that the 8 p.m. game is not like the tactical night game where everything is just product placement, like where the referees are using like tack sunglasses to like shield us in some way, shape, or form.
Don't threaten them with a good time, Andy.
Yeah.
I will only threaten them with the Spurtle game. All referees use Spurtles as the.
I got a set of Spurtles for Christmas. They actually work pretty well.
Yeah, the reason why it is an 8 p.m. game is, like you said, it's going to be the TAC game because this is TAC's great opportunity to get their name into the Carrier Dome naming rights competition. So, this is it.
So
Stadium,
we're moving to the Bell and Howell Dome.
The stadium, yeah.
Yeah, Bell and Howell Dome, I think, is that. Yeah.
It just rolls off the tongue.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, looking at the actual product on the field, Christian, you brought up a really good point that I hadn't considered. A primetime game on CBS Sports against Ohio is starting to freak me out a bit because, one, MAC after dark is always a terrifying possibility, especially since the game's on the road. And two, I just realized, Ohio hasn't played a full schedule since 2019. The MAC did not play in any kind of quarantine shortened season. They attempted to, it didn't quite work. So we don't really know what Ohio has to offer other than in their last season in 2019, Pitt hung tough with them, but Pitt won 20-10 in Pittsburgh. So that's a really weird game, and I don't love that. And they defeated a really good Buffalo team. They defeated Kent State and our friend Sean Lewis. Their losses are all really tight. So this is a team that I'm realizing is probably going to be a well-coached team that we're not going to have any film on. Like, there's literally no film of this current roster playing football. And Steve, when you're going into your first game of the year, I understand that there's always we don't technically have film, but you're looking at past tendencies. You're looking at what the coaching staff likes to do. Yeah. What if you don't even have that? Are you just at that point lining up and guessing?
Then you run against random crap like you saw against Liberty last year or the year before, where you're just like, I don't know what they're going to throw at me. At the same time, there is a track record on what the coach's system at least is, and where it's going to be. You don't have specific personnel keys, but you do have broader scale scouting stuff. as dumb as it sounds, I'm pretty sure this year for Syracuse is going to be similar. From what we're hearing, there's not skill position wise. You have Tucker, but you're returning two guys who have had a year off. You're adding a couple different options. If they do the goddamn thing and move Tosh Harris down to the slot, that really will change things. And I can't comprehend. Again, whatever. We can rant about that for days during the off season, but it's gonna be a new look Tommy from everything we're hearing. God forbid they trot Schrader out there and really screw with people.
No, it's gonna be Lamson. That's what's real. I gotta fuck
Lamson right off the bat.
It's a Lamson, yeah, right off the bat. Mm-hmm.
So it's gonna be a healthy offensive line. I made it to the 30-minute mark before saying offensive line. We're good.
Yeah, make sure you knock on wood before someone gets freak injured during summer ball.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a different team than what showed up on film last year. So not to the same degree Ohio will be, but yeah, exactly. Here. There you go.
Christian, something else that came up this week is that we started to see a lot of the over-under win totals coming out from sports books. Syracuse was given the over-under of 3 wins, so meaning that if you take the under, you need Syracuse to win just 2 games. If you take the over, you're banking on Syracuse winning at least 4 games, which is, I think, an interesting way for most books to handle it. David Hale named this as one of the best bets to make of college football. He likes Syracuse getting at least 4 wins. Personally, if I was the sportsbook, I would have set it right at 4 and really make people sweat it out. Like, I don't really know if I could put money on Syracuse only winning 3 or winning 5. I feel like 4 is right on the money. But say shit goes sideways against Ohio and they lose that game. Liberty returns returns more production than almost any other Power 5 team in the country. They're coming, like, that game could be a loss as well. So say Syracuse, and Rutgers is somehow also improving. So with a weird non-conference schedule, like, is there any path to Syracuse getting those 4 wins if they don't win 3 non-conference games?
I'm gonna say no, because I'm not feeling good about Syracuse in conference play, like, at all. What Syracuse needs to do is vastly show that they're going to be creative on offense and that the run defense is actually somewhat adequate this year in order to actually have any faith in this team right now, especially in conference play, because pretty much every team in the ACC is pretty good and set up in a way to exploit those Syracuse glaring weaknesses. And really, the tough thing is like Albany might only be the only secure win on this schedule, because like you said, Ohio is an unknown. Rutgers is somehow improving, and Liberty still has Malik Willis and still has a plethora of running backs that decided that even if you go to the 4th string running back on their roster, he's still going to break out a 50-yard run to completely demoralize the defense. So, like, they're like, the improvements that Syracuse coaches have been talking about have been made. They need to show up. Otherwise, I might even go under at a 3 line. I might go 2 wins, if we don't see those improvements.
Yeah, it's a weird. You look at that schedule and it's literally Albany and Clemson, and then 10 coin flips. I mean, most of the time us on the wrong side of the coin if you're looking at actual betting lines, but 10 games that are, feasibly there's a shot we have at them, but also that we very easily could lose. Like, you tell me we're losing any of those games and it's like, yeah, okay. Yeah.
And it also seems like a pretty tight spectrum. Like, like if it's going to be a Syracuse win, it's going to be a 1-possession win. If it's a Syracuse loss, it's at least a minimum a 3-possession loss.
Right. Yep.
And like, that's the spectrum. There's no in between.
Yeah, I'm looking at this schedule, and the way opening on the road against Ohio is a tough draw, and I understand that Syracuse is trying to do this open on the road stuff because they can't draw the first weekend of the year, which is remarkably terrifying as the long term health of the football program. That is an off season content discussion that we can get into, but after Ohio, you've got 3 home games, and I almost wish that Albany came before Rutgers. I feel like this is a Syracuse team that could use a game against Albany to get their feet wet, not really show a lot on tape,
Yep.
run up the score, get everybody confident before you play Rutgers, before you play Liberty, and you at least catch Rutgers off guard, and then you have to give your best game against Liberty in order to shut down Malik. Instead, it really kind of feels like the Albany game could be a lick your wounds kind of a game. I am fully expecting, and Steve, you'll remember this, Christian, I don't know if you'll remember this. The last time that Rutgers came to the Carrier Dome, it was like a 13 to 10.
It was the ugliest game of football I've ever attended.
Yes.
And I attended the Iowa game. That was the Rutgers game was the ugliest football game I've ever attended.
And John's gonna have an argument with you about that.
Oh no, John and I both were there. I don't think he was at that shit mess of a Rutgers game, but yeah, that was oh god. Ugh.
Yes, so it was. Oh my goodness. Yes, it was.
Okay,
it was just really bad.
What year was this?
I believe
2012.
12?
What?
2011?
Yeah, 2011, 2012, somewhere in there.
I think 2012 was in. Okay, yeah. So 2012 was in Piscataway, and that was also a Syracuse one possession loss. The Syracuse Rutgers game that we're mentioning was a double overtime 19-16 Rutgers win.
Yeah.
Ryan Nassib went 15 for 32 with 3 interceptions.
Oh God.
Yeah. Alec Lemon led receivers for the Orange with 54 total yards. The Orange basically tried running the ball up Rutgers' gut and did not really succeed. Antoine Bailey got 124 yards on 23 carries, which looks way better than it actually was. But the overall, Rutgers ended up with the 3 interceptions. They ended up with just the scoreline is just terrible. And I'm pulling up the stats right here because this is what I thought I remembered. Syracuse was somehow 6 for 15 on third downs, which isn't bad, and Rutgers was 7 for 21, and Rutgers still won.
Yeah.
Because Rutgers passed for over 350 yards, Syracuse had the 178. Rutgers only had 5 rushing yards and still won the game.
Yeah, Syracuse had I want to say they had at least 2 or 3 red zone possessions. That was they either had a turnover that put them in position, and my buddy and I that were at the game were like, yeah, we're going to finally shit ourselves. Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we
Syracuse
go.
ended the game with 5 turnovers, 2 fumbles lost, 3 interceptions thrown. It is, to your point, Steve, it is arguably the ugliest game the Carrier Dome has seen in a very long time, just in terms of pure incompetence.
Mm-hmm. And that's saying a lot.
Yeah. It's probably the worst post-Gerg game in the Carrier Dome.
Ooh, yeah, it might be.
There's a lot of bad Gerg ones.
Mm-hmm. Well,
there's a lot of bad post-Gerg games in the Carrier Dome.
They are, but those were blowouts against good teams.
And there were plenty more bad Gerg games in the Carrier Dome too.
Yeah.
I mean, if the Villanova game ended up in a loss, that would have been the worst game because, good lord, as everyone has known on this website, the scars have still not fully healed from me witnessing that game.
Mm-hmm.
As my first ever game in the Carrier Dome.
Hey.
Yeah. The Nova one continues to rank up there. I will give it that. But the Rutgers loss, I knew that was in there. We will write many think pieces about that.
There's a Louisville game in there too that was really bad too, just ineptitude bad. And then of course the Jackson hurdle. But let's wash that taste from our mouth with some news that. They did a couple of outlets are starting to announce their preseason all league selections. It looks like Taj is getting the most love of anyone. Hale actually has him on the no, Hale didn't have him in there. He was on the third line in Athlon's list. Schmidt is happening, according to David Hale, as the number 1 overall kicker in the conference. And Kingsley Jonathan apparently
this
got
is the
the
weird
nod
one.
at DT.
Mm-hmm.
So unless he's doing some weird, like, bouncing around positions, yeah, I don't know. That's going to be, I agree that he's probably going to have a good year. To slot him in at DT, and that might be just a function of the 3-3-5 that he's calling all 3 of our linemen D tackles with the rolled up linebackers as the ends or something along those lines. Like, it might just be a systemic thing. But seeing his name on that defensive tackle line was like, okay.
Yeah, it's like we're playing a 3-back. Like, we don't have any wing backs. It's all
Right.
it's all center backs.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I was going to say, who is lining up along the line? Because we know Josh Black is returning.
Black Bear and Kingsley. We got the same linebacker.
So
it's the
we're
same,
getting the
it's the
band
same
back
line,
together,
and then
man.
if you want to, it's the same line, and then if you want to play a 4 end, if you want to play a 4 line, it's got to be Cody Roscoe as the 4th guy.
Yep.
I mean, it's the same. It's going to be the same.
Right. Or
So
you're gonna
really,
roll up
Bear's
Stephon Thompson
Bear's
or
the defensive
Linton as-
tackle.
Bears defensive tackle, and then if Roscoe comes in, it's Bear and Black as the defensive tackles.
Yep.
Ah.
It's a funky one.
Mm-hmm.
But more likely what you'll see is just Linton or Thompson rolling up.
Yeah, usually.
Well, I'd love to go too down the weeds of football schematics here, but we saw a lot last year, at least early in the year before Cisco got hurt. We didn't just have the linebacker roll up, we had the rover roll up to the line and cause some weird looks. I know that White was a big fan of the overstack, having both guys roll up on the same side of the field and then having none of them rush just in order to get the offensive line unbalanced, so that way they were able to sneak somebody in on the other side.
Right, that is called making the tackle poop himself.
So I'm really intrigued who from the who is going to be the rover, and will our rover be able to do that kind of roll up responsibility? Cisco was a specimen physically.
Yeah.
So him being in the box makes a ton of sense. I don't know if we're going to have a rover that can provide that level of support in the box, which now makes me think like, okay, maybe you just have the defensive ends act like defensive tackles and just absorb space instead of trying to get pressure into the backfield. Like, I'm obviously galaxy braining David Hale's stuff here, but I trust Hale, and I'm wondering if schematically, to your point, they're just going to kind of, Christian, to your point, they're just going to kind of have these 3 guys take up space and hope that all 3 can use up the entire offensive line. It's not great. I don't love it, but I can see the logic if you can't roll up a rover into a pressure situation.
It isn't great, but like as Steve and I pointed out, that's essentially what like the role of the defensive line is in a 3-3-5. Like, you're not going to see, like, the frustrating thing about the 3-3-5 is that you're not going to see eye-popping numbers from the D tackles. You're not going to see the numbers that Alton Robinson and Kendall Coleman put up in their 2018 and 2019 seasons, because the 3-3-5 is intended for those D tackles to take up space and occupy the blockers in order for the linebackers and the rover to do their jobs and attack the ball carriers. Which is why it was a little frustrating at times last year when you only saw 3 or 4 man rushes, which was a little bit odd, especially with given the nature of the 3-3-5. But unfortunately, like, that is the role of the defensive line, is to keep the opposing offensive line occupied so that the natural holes open up for the linebackers.
Right, and I think, like you were talking, that time, the times where you saw, a bait, and, yes, every game you're going to see some of a base 3-man or 4-man rush, but primarily it was during that, what I'll refer to as the Star Wars fan in me as the dark times that White referred to with the Duke game and the plus or minus around that Duke game, where he said himself he wasn't letting the guys play their game. And I think that was a lot of what he realized was, he's trying to run this base defense. He's trying to hold them back. He's trying to get too cute in coverage or what they're doing at the linebacker or secondary levels instead of just calling the defense that he wants to and just letting the kids go. And I think the reins might be off a little this year. You've got guys that are, you have a full offseason in the system. You have a coach who's familiar with the players more. You have a set of both linebackers and DBs that, while they're young, have another year on them. So, and sixth year across the front three. Like this, I think we're going to see a lot more dialed up this year, and a lot more Memorial Day fireworks apparently.
I was going to say they're starting.
Yeah. A lot more, creative uses of those guys. Or I'm hoping that we see that, especially after hearing what White said during his happy fun time there.
And when you hear the players, they always talk about the thing that they love the most about White's system is that it lets them fly around and run.
Yep.
And it's kind of hard when he has you dropping back into zone coverage and just holding his own while the quarterback throws over your head right into the perfect middle of that soft spot of the zone that is naturally created between the linebackers and the safeties.
Yep.
So letting those guys loose a little bit, I think, is only going to free them up a bit more, because you can see it, like you can tell when you're listening to the linebackers in the press conference, they're itching to get after the guys and just hit them. And because that's what White has kind of promised them that they'll do. So that's the key thing, is to like you said, just let them loose a little bit more.
Yep. Yeah, and without handcuffing them, he should be able to, work something out to get them to play to the best of their ability. So
yeah, my hope is that ultimately we don't just see the 3-3-5 as we kind of intended it last year. I'm hoping that we start to see some more wrinkles in it as well. Like I thought, Steve, we talked about this a lot last year during the football season. Like the 3-3-5 was showing a lot of flexibility and showing a lot of confusion early on. And my hope is that we can continue that level of confusion for a whole season. Like, yeah. I really do want to continue to see it be adaptable. I want to see it be malleable. I want to see it adapt to the players that Syracuse has. And I also want to see it be able to exploit weaknesses that other teams have, the way that they were able to adapt their defenses to exploit Syracuse's offensive weaknesses before, the weakness just became run up the middle because their line can't stop anybody.
Yeah. And I would assume you're going to see a lot more of that with the familiarity, both with the system and personnel, and with White just being more comfortable with what he's doing. He probably has more leeway from Dino. Like, Dino's not going to get to where he wants to be if White's being conservative and playing a base D. And I think everyone knows that. So we'll see where that goes, and hopefully it works out well.
Yeah, I think we all have high hopes for the defense. It's weird to be talking about a Dino Babers team, and we're more optimistic in the offseason about a defense than an offense, especially a defense that just saw 3 players go pro. So, times for everybody.
Yeah, thankfully 2 of those 3 players were hurt most of the season, so we were able to get other people some run.
Yeah.
As dumb as that sounds.
2020 was the weirdest season ever. Mm-hmm. Also, speaking of weird seasons, Ben's basketball. We have some more transfer portal news, but instead of somebody going into the portal, we have somebody coming out of the portal because he went in, didn't find anything, and came on back out. John Bol-Ajak, who has not seen a ton of the court for Syracuse, is returning. It seems like, based off of everything that Boeheim has said, or rather not said, this is kind of it. I don't think we should be expecting anything else from the Syracuse roster standpoint to come in or out. This is kind of what we got. And Christian, as the transfer portal expert, it sure seems like Syracuse lost a lot more than it got back.
Yeah, websites love to do like winners and losers whenever you talk about like the off season or like the NBA draft and stuff like that. Syracuse definitely comes out of this as a loser because like you can just tell that the overall strength of the program dips a little, which means Syracuse inevitably makes an Elite 8 run next year. But I digress. It's just weird because you would have. It feels like, and this goes across the the program and across the school, not just the men's basketball program, but across Syracuse. It feels like Syracuse was a little bit behind in like getting onto the transfer portal and taking advantage of the like free agency that the transfer portal created, not just in basketball, but I mean again across all sports in the program. So it's like the Ajax thing. It's nice that he's back. Like it's depth at least. But like again, he's as we saw last year, he's not going to get major minutes, and he's going to be that guy that Boeheim puts out there when Sidibe gets into foul trouble, and then pulls him back out after 2 minutes because he fumbles a rebound that leads to a score.
Right, and that's only going to be during the non-con because
Yeah.
once you get to meaningful minutes, you've got him, you've got Anselm, you've got other
Edwards,
bodies down there.
Mhm.
Edwards, yeah,
Yeah.
the guy who actually played last year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the roster feels pretty set. I don't love the roster. I think we talked ad nauseum about this, and like we'll wait until we get closer to basketball season to fully dissect this. But if you want to play Syracuse roster builder, TBT is back. Boeheim's Army will be returning. They're going to play in the alumni basketball tournament, meaning that a bunch of your former favorite Syracuse basketball players are going to be wearing orange again for the chance at splitting a $1 million prize. Boeheim's Army has made the championship game once. They've been a pretty big staple of this tournament for the last few seasons. However, it really does feel like they've kind of stagnated over the last few because they haven't found that right roster mix. And it really seemed like the recipe to success in this tournament was to get shooters, just get a ton of shooters. And it feels like that has changed over the last few years. You need to kind of have a more complete team. And we don't know any official roster news other than Eric Devendorf is probably going to play because he's the ageless wonder when it comes to this tournament. He'll be the second best point guard in the whole tournament because he always is. But other than that, Steve, are there any players that you'd like to see on this Boeheim's Army roster from a pure aesthetic standpoint or from a, I really think that this kind of player is what they need to put them over the top?
Matt Gorman.
I do
That's
not
it.
know that name.
You don't remember Matty Gorman?
Yeah, I do not
Oh my
remember Matty
God.
Gorman. Educate me.
Oh my god. No, he
Educate
was
me,
just a
Steve.
random. He's a local kid from Watertown that was a scholarship player back in the 2000s.
Is Watertown local enough for Syracuse?
In upstate New York, yes. I mean, they consider Glens Falls local.
Right, they do. They do consider Glens Falls local. Yeah.
I mean, you're talking to a kid who grew up like driving 20 miles to a gas station from my house. So local is it's like I was 23 miles from the school I went to. So local's relative when it comes to upstate New York, yeah.
I'm glad you've
yeah.
educated me on Syracuse basketball players from upstate New York.
Yeah, no. And Gorman was I actually was he on that 03 squad on the bench? He was either there or right after it, but either way, he played in Ireland professionally for a while. It was kind of awesome. How I know these things, I don't know. Useful facts need to move into my head, but
I mean, your headspace is already filled with offensive line knowledge, so like, there's not much room to like cram anything else in.
right, I can't like knock that out. So
No.
Yeah.
we're working with
That
what
is
we
your
got.
brand.
Between that and random Marvel facts, I think we're there.
Pretty full.
If anyone
Christian,
wants
do you have
those,
anybody...
tune in half an hour for the next podcast.
Christian, is there anybody that you want to see on TBT?
Adrian Autry Jr. No,
Yes.
No, have Red lace him up, man. He's still got it.
Honestly, I'd be down for that.
It would have been no shape or set if he didn't get a massive contract.
That was my exact thoughts, which is why Matt Gorman got a shout out on the podcast.
O'Shea really was kind of the answer for this, wasn't he? He was like everybody he had a nice G League season. He wasn't really getting NBA look, and then he played his way into a 3-year contract. So
Like circumstances did help in Indiana. Like everyone was injured. I mean, that's also Syracuse. That's a very Syracuse thing to happen. Also, everyone gets injured, and then all of a sudden, hey, look who's here.
Right. Hi, Sean Tucker. How are you?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that. Like it's either that happens or the reverse happens, where Syracuse star immediately gets injured and then falls off the cliff.
Hi, Johnny Flynn. How are you?
Exactly. Like, so the ideal guy that I think a couple of people have pointed out is Tyus Battle. I mean, that's a scorer that you want, and he plays good defense as well. Again, he's not getting pro looks. He just played in the Russian league, so like he'd be the ideal guy to get in his team. Will he come? Hopefully, but we'll see. But that's the ideal guy that you want in his team. It's Tyus Battle.
The last TBT that I covered in person, Tyus Battle showed up because the games were in Brooklyn, and so he's a New Jersey kid, and he was debating about whether he was going to go pro or not. And I interviewed him. I asked him about playing in the TBT, and his response was that it was a nice thing to have in his back pocket. And so I wonder. Obviously, Tyus was a very smart kid. He was very media savvy. I'm sure that he was knew all the lines to make sure that the pieces were good. But it would be nice to see. I agree. I think Tyus is kind of the guy you go after. I think Rakeem Christmas is somebody you kind of look at as well. There's a lot of these younger alumni that haven't really found a home anywhere that bring them back for one more run and see what happens, because the field is definitively better. There are a lot of teams that are really stacked with really good talent this year. Like the Ohio State alumni team looks insane. The Buffalo alumni team is filled with guys who have done really good things at the professional level. Like it is no longer just a tournament of who can get the biggest names from your program's last Sweet 16 run. You're now getting the best alumni from all schools, and when you do that, it turns out that in college basketball, a lot of teams can recruit a lot of talent over a period of time. So when you let them combine those years together, they end up pretty damn good. So I think it'll be fun summer basketball. It'll give us something to cover during the season. But really,
how much orange blood does B.J. Johnston still have in him?
Oh, he has enough.
Enough.
Yeah. We were talking about Ron Patterson being in the doghouse and being a Syracuse guy. BJ's got plenty. They were on the same team, weren't they? Yeah,
they were. They both transferred out after the 14-15 season.
Yes.
It's funny how that happens repeatedly.
That's a topic for another time.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's not harp on that one now.
Somehow we've managed to go a full hour with only one Syracuse game happening, but we are officially in off-season mode. So for those of you watching on Monday, please leave some ideas for us to talk about in the comments. Otherwise, we're going to get a little bit weird. We're going to get weird no matter what, but we'll just get weirder without your help. For everybody watching live, feel free to throw them into the comments on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get some of these engagement numbers up. Help us break the YouTube algorithm. That would be fantastic. And otherwise, this has been yet another edition of Troy Nunes' An Absolute Livecast. Christian, give us the rundown of all the things we need people to do.
All right, everyone, make sure you like the video as well. Leave a comment as well, like Andy said, to help us break the YouTube algorithm. Give us some ideas that we can talk about during this weird off-season of college sports isn't happening. What the hell are we going to talk about? And subscribe as well to the channel if you haven't already, so you get notified whenever we go live for one of these live casts or any of our future videos. And when you do subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified as well.
He's got that down to a science.
This is why he's the youth. He is the youth that we go to explain TikTok.
So does that make me the crotchety old man? Am I playing the Bayheim role?
You've got a little bit more gray in your beard than my hypothetical beard has, even though it's very close.
My hypothetical beard. That might be the episode name right there.
My hypothetical beard. I tried to grow the playoff beard for the Penguins' short-lived run, and it turns out Mark Sanchez just set expectations incredibly high for all Hispanics with facial hair. It is not something that we can do, And what I can do gets very weirdly gray underneath the chin. So we're just done. We're done trying any of this.
This is the most I can muster as a Filipino, and that's kind of upsetting. But whatever.
Yeah, this is light for me. So
I know you're the you're the upstate bearded man. This is all part of your brand.
yeah, we were up camping this weekend, and at one point I looked at my wife. I had, this mess was down and scraggly with a baseball hat over it and sunglasses and like a bandana on, and I'm like, I am literally just looking like a stereotypical Adirondack grunger like guy that's just chilling. I'm like, yeah.
Did you have a mason jar full of a craft beer? Because if so, then yes, you are.
I had a Hill Farmstead Marie. Did that count?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. There it is. That's it.
Yep.
Steve has been assimilated.
So. Yeah. It's a thing.
Welcome to the off-season content, guys. This is what you have to look forward to.
Yep.
So for Christian, for Steve, for myself, for everybody at the NunesMagician family, thank you all so much for tuning in each week to these live casts. We'll be back Sunday night, 8 p.m. Do all the things that Christian told you to. Check out the site this week. Get to Know Your Orange Man starts up this week. Everybody's favorite off-season orange biographical series. And make sure you drop around the site sometime this week. We'll see you there, and we'll see you next week. Go Orange.
Go Orange.
Orange.